I'm here to talk to you guys today about investing in your number one asset. And so in real estate, we get really hung up on external metrics. So I like to call it the 3 Ds: more deals, more doors, more dollars. And when you're talking to other investors, those are the external metrics of success that we're constantly comparing ourselves to, right? But ultimately, your number one asset is yourself. And I think that we intuitively know this, but I think that in internalizing that, it's also important to zoom out from the deals and doors and dollars once in a while and think about what are the levers, what are the metrics, what are the things I really need to be measuring in my own performance. So a little bit about me before we get into the meat of these 5 pillars. So I actually started out as a property manager. So I've managed over 1,000 doors in my career, and I'll tell you a story. The real moment when I became a full-time proper investor is I had a client who was arguing with me about a $300 bill to buy dumpsters. So the tenants trashed the dumpsters, and I went out and decided I'm going to buy, $300 worth of dumpsters, have them delivered. And then the guy was so angry with me, he wouldn't pay the $300 bill. And then I took out my calculator, and I figured out how much money did I make this guy last year. Turns out I upped his property value by $300K. And when that happened, I was like, you know what, I'm doing this the wrong way, and I need to manage for equity now. And so instead of just charging property management fees the way a typical property management company would do, I have a business model where I help optimize somebody's property, but then I take part of the upside. And so that's what's led to that 90 doors. And so I still get to do property management, which I love. I have a company that does it. And then along the way, I have started the Equity Builders Club, which is a very niche coaching company that has a whole program that helps people go from mom and pop investor to professional investor in my niche market of Quebec, which is the French-speaking part of Canada. And one of the things that's a bit unique about investing in Canada is we really can't scale single-family home investing. So you kind of have to go up to 5 doors, because in less than that, you can't get debt service ratio mortgages. So those properties are really meant for homeowners. You can get to 3, and then you're capped out of borrowing capacity. So in order to hack this, if you want to scale, you really have to go from mom and pop, which for us is less than 5 doors, to professional investor. And so then in addition to doing this, the Equity Builders Club and being a property manager, I also had a past life as a martial artist. So I competed in kickboxing, and then, because that wasn't exciting enough, I switched to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and won 3 world championships as a senior in that sport. Thank you. But what I want to share with you is that really there is a great parallel in terms of investing in yourself as an asset. And as an athlete, you absolutely 100% have to do that. And so being able to understand how that works when you invest in yourself as an asset, as an athlete, well, when you're a real estate investor, you have to make those same commitments. And it's something that we kind of end up forgetting when we're so preoccupied with those financial metrics that we're always looking at as real estate investors. And so in the sports world, when we talk about conditioning, right, we're talking about physically what kind of shape you're in. Well, the fact is whatever's happening for you personally, whether it's health-wise, in your relationships, is going to directly affect how you play when you're on the court. And in real estate, it's completely the same thing. Because if you're having health issues, if you're having personal issues, if your relationships are in disarray, your capacity to grow as a business owner and as an investor is going to be capped. And so looking at yourself, doing a personal growth audit is definitely a very important way that you have to make sure that you're in optimal shape to be playing this game that we're all trying to be professionals at, right, as real estate investors. Then when we talk about, who you practice with, because one of the things that was key for me as I was kind of going up the levels in competing was who are the girls I'm training with? And of course, as a woman, it's also more difficult because you're in a smaller weight class, and who am I going to be able to train with that's going to make me better? But my training partners directly impact how good I'm going to be. And if you put that into the real estate world, it's who are you hanging out with? Who are you having conversations with? And this isn't a competitive world in the same way as the sports world is, because I think luckily all of us here who are part of these communities and part of the community like Dustin's trying to create, which is really a giving one, is that we believe that there's enough. And so we have the luxury that everybody in this room and who's attending the conference is really looking to help out other people. But in terms of who you're playing with, who your teammates are, who you see as your peers, surrounding yourself with people who are playing at a professional investor level is really important in terms of how you end up advancing. And then there's the strategy aspect. And I always love to say that as a fighter, there's like some girls who have these crazy submissions, and they were like tapping everybody out all the time. I'm not that kind of fighter, and I never played that way in real estate either. If you understand the rules, you understand the point system, you understand how things work, you're able to hack that to give yourself an unfair advantage. And so with an average amount of talent, you can become an exceptional athlete or an exceptional investor just by hacking the system in a way that other people maybe don't take the time to do. And before I got up here, I was listening to some of the other presentations, whether it was, the tax accountant or the lending guy, and the quality of that knowledge that helps you really hack what it is that we're doing here, an amazing way to just help yourself level up and start to play at that professional level. Okay, so then the other thing, just to really finish with this point of investing in yourself, is here's the thought experiment of what would happen if you lost everything. And when I have conversations, not so much with other investors, but often with people, whether it's family or community or people that I run into who are not in the real estate investing world, they always mention some kind of unfair advantage. And whether it's the family you were born into, the education you had, how much money you started out with, the color of your hair, whatever it is, there's this tendency to think that you had some kind of unfair advantage. And to that, I like to say, well, what if everything was taken away? What if I didn't have those 90 doors anymore? What if I didn't have the business connections? What if you dropped me in another country and everything that I'd built so far didn't exist? How many of you think would want to bet on a horse or would want to bet on somebody who has all this knowledge? And nobody can take that investment away from you, right? If you know how to scale a business, if you know how to network, if you understand the methodology that allows you to do it, no one can ever take that away from you, even though an economic cycle might go up and down. And there's a slide a little bit further on. We'll see if it's on the next one. I'm surprising myself with my slides here. But that, even if you make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. And I talk to, some of my coaching students now, and we in Montreal, we live in this crazy rent-controlled environment. And we have this very Byzantine way that we have to increase our rents, where we have a spreadsheet and you have to put the last 3 years' expenses and then it's 0.2% of whatever. So this thing is you need a college degree to do your rent increases. And so one of my students messed it up. And once you lose a rent increase, you can't get it back. So this was maybe a $10,000 or $20,000 mistake when you're looking at the valuation, because in multifamily assets, it's not just one cash flow, it's those assets are sold in multiples of revenue. So if you make a $1 mistake, that's times 12 times 20. So every mistake you make is a times 12 times 20 mistake. And so she called me and was like, Terrie, I think I messed up. And I looked at what she did, I'm like, yeah, you messed up. But you know what? Those mistakes are the kind of things that you rebound from. And it's how you deal with those mistakes that actually ends up determining where you end up. And so even though you might start with very little, by investing in yourself, that then ends up being how you end up playing professionally and being able to do it over a long time span. Because it's one thing to do a couple of good deals, but it's another thing to be able to scale and make that repeatable over a 10 or a 20-year time span. So let's now jump into the 5 pillars of self-investment. And so, coaching program is very niche, so I don't think any of you guys are going to specifically want to learn how to invest in Quebec anytime soon. But the system that we've built around these 5 pillars, I think is really exceptional when I see what it does for upping the chances that our students are really able to make that jump to being professional investors. And so the first aspect is really community. So we all know that your peers end up setting the bar for how you perform. And I talked about that a little bit earlier with how your training partners end up affecting your level of performance. But how do we really invest in communities? So you guys are all here. Maybe some of you are from St. Louis. Some of you probably traveled a long way. We sure traveled a long way to be here. But how do you take that back locally to those markets that you're looking at investing in and creating those communities that are going to make sense there? Because if I look at the business that I've built, whether it's from the investing side or the coaching side, what makes it work is that it's so hyper local. And so it's great to come to these bigger events and connect with people who are from all over, but eventually that community has to be built in a specific location, because that's going to be where you get all those really great, all that great network and all the magic happens. And so, obviously you guys are all probably listening to podcasts, and some of you have come through Dustin's coaching program, but really education and continuing education is not something to be trifled with. Because it's one thing to buy that first house, but at every single level of the game, you have to keep upgrading your skills. And for me, as I grow in my business, whether it's through coaching or through investing, I don't get to take a day off. And it's not like it comes that after you buy that first property, eventually when you get to 10, the learning stops. So you have to continue investing in that education, which, yes, it takes time, and probably it also takes a little bit of money, but that's a continuing commitment to what you're going to be doing as you grow as a real estate investor. Then the next thing is support. And this really ties in with community. Because what I like to say to my students is that one of my main role as the person who's offering the coaching, if you could call it that, is to remove the obstacles from in front of them. And as you're moving through whatever business model you choose to get good at, obstacles will come up for you. And having that support from members of the community or mentors or people who have done what you're trying to do is just going to help move some of those obstacles out of your way. And that's really how you compress time. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do by being at conferences, listening to podcasts, and immersing ourselves in this, is we're trying to avoid some of those trial and error mistakes that somebody who spent 20 years making those mistakes did. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just compress that time by really investing in support and education? Now, this is cool, and I know for a fact that Dustin is involved in one of these accountability pods, but one of the things that we do when people come into our program is we put them in an accountability pod. And so human beings are social animals. And again, as a combat athlete, me with my bathroom scale, there's one conversation. But when I know that I have to get up and compete, and my coach is counting on me to make weight, and my teammates and everybody who put effort, when I have to go and weigh in for an event, believe me, my diet's going to be on point. And everything that we do as humans, the more that we can make ourselves accountable to our peers, the more likely we are to follow through on stuff. And so what we do is we create these groups of 4 or 5 people who meet weekly in an accountability pod. And so you're sitting down with your 1-year plan or your 3-month plan, and the goal of that is to show up to those people who are at your level and check in. So are you on track? Did you do what you said you were going to do? What problems are you facing? And just being able to bounce that off. So our meetings are virtual, and usually the people are kind of in the same area, but they don't necessarily have to be. And so there are some coaching systems that offer this, but if they don't, this is really something that you can totally create for yourselves by picking other motivated individuals. And again, by going to networking events and meeting other people who have similar goals. And I will just mention one other thing. As a female investor and a female business owner who's also a family woman, I have the luxury of having a pod we're all women who are in similar situations. And the support of having other people who are facing the same challenges as I am, and all of you will be able to imagine that in your own life a certain way. But in my daily life, all my colleagues are men. And it's a really different situation when you're, a family man and you have a wife who maybe smooths some of the edges off, whereas when you're a female business owner and an investor and you also have family responsibilities. So there's an aspect of support with this as well that allows you to bounce ideas off of people. And so I would encourage you, everybody who's in the room, if you guys are not in some sort of an accountability structure like this, with people who are at a similar level to you, if you do one thing from this conference, go home and consider setting that up for yourself, because it's made a huge impact in my life. And if you talk to a lot of other people who are playing whatever game at a high level, probably they've got some kind of accountability system in place to keep them on track. And the final thing is strategy. And I'm sure that you guys have heard a lot of this in other presentations that you've had. But when people come into our program, we really drill the SMART goals method into them. And it doesn't matter if you've been investing for a long time and if you've been in this optimization game for a while, we all don't do this as diligently as we should. And so are you really sitting down over the Christmas holidays and making that one-year plan? Are you doing all your little check boxes all the time? And do you have that strategy? Because the fact is that if you don't set out long-range planning or medium-range planning, it's really easy for life to get distracting. And my cell phone is not on me right now, but Lord knows there are so many opportunities for distraction and for the busyness of life to get in our way. And it's really that longer-term strategy and then being held accountable to it that makes sure that our feet is held to the fire and we're doing what we set out to do. Because otherwise, it's very easy to just get distracted by life and responsibilities and obligations. So definitely having a plan in whatever format you want to set that up for yourself is the final one of these 5 pillars. So, yeah, so really what I would encourage you, if there's one thing that you take away from this speech, it's to really think about how real estate investing, there's a lot of great knowledge and tactics and strategy out there. And I think, this conference, you're definitely going to be able to have those conversations where you're going to hear what strategy one or other person is using. But that if you're really looking at forcing success, so as real estate investors, we force appreciation, right? We force our buildings to perform better as assets. We're taking on problems that other people don't want to deal with. But if we're trying to force success, this is a process that is well known. There's a methodology for this. And so in terms of doing it with the 5 pillars of community, support, education, accountability, and strategy, if you're able to find ways to implement that, it's going to really be the way that you force this appreciation to happen in your investing journey in the same way you would force an asset to appreciate when you're working on it. So, thank you, St. Louis.